a sympathy. My life is like a symphony. Speak the truth so lyrically. Be one with God so spiritually. I'll tell you haters what I see. Just call me Psycho Sid, that's who I be.
Welcome, everyone, to the Sid Ammar Show. Today's guest is Sandra Alhassan. Sandra reached out to me from Adelaide, Australia. She is a Year 12 student and is currently undertaking an investigation for her Societies and Culture class. She is exploring the influence of Christianity and the Druze faith on individual values and beliefs and their impact on societal and cultural change. So, welcome, Sandra.
Thank you so much for having me. I would just like to start off by asking you actually what drove you to start a show like this and where your passion came from regarding, the links that you make and yeah, how did you get to the point you are at today?
Okay, so that's a good question. I where I got today. This has always been, it's always been inside of me. So I've always been interested in the world ever since I was in my early teenage years. I developed a strong interest in, I'd say around 15 years old, especially in high school, grade 10, 11, 12. I developed a strong interest in matters of faith, of religion and history. I remember being extremely, 15, 16 years old, I'm Lebanese, reading up on the history of Lebanon, and I'm a Druze, and, reading up on the history of the Druze, and I'm a Arab, and I'm this,
Mm.
led me into exploring more about the history of the Middle East and, who we are, where we come from. And that has brought me to the modern day. I've been involved with the Druze community, in Edmonton for probably since 2006 or late 2006, early 2007, all the way to the modern day. And yeah, I decided to start a show last year, the Sid Ammar show, specifically targeting the topics of religion and spirituality and essentially anything else that is of interest. I like good conversation. I enjoy good conversations about important topics that affect humanity. So I feel I have a role to play in that regard.
I Absolutely. And so speaking of that, the conversations that you have, the podcast that you've made, I mean, I've seen one on the topic of, finance. What main themes do you aim to address in your podcasts, just as a
So
general standing?
yes, so as I mentioned, like my favorite topics are going to be, uh, you know, politics and religion, as the main two. Spirituality, economics, essentially everything. I view politics and religion. I have a unique perspective on these matters. I essentially view them as the same thing. I know today we have in society this idea that politics and religion are separate or something that has to be separated. In reality, it's impossible because they both involve the governing of human affairs.
Absolutely.
You cannot really separate them. Politics itself, you have political parties. Political parties have regulations, they have platform points, they have a shared common set of beliefs. They become like a religion. And on the religion side, in religion, there is a structure, there's a hierarchy, um there's governance, there's an ideology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I view them as the same thing. When you're interacting with human beings, you're being political by default. That's politics right there. How you are with human beings. You can say this and you can't say that, or you're not allowed to say this and you can say that. You say that, you're going to offend this person. It's the same thing, whether you're dealing with two people from different political parties, or whether you're dealing with someone from your own family, or your friend, or a worker, or a colleague, or an employer, or whatever. We as human beings, de facto, by nature, we're being political every single day in every single one of our interactions.
Absolutely, we
So
are. Yeah,
yeah, so these are the major topics, but I intend to discuss anything that I feel has an importance for humanity as a whole.
absolutely. Yes. That's very important to have, and it's important to discuss how, well, where the societal values align. And just as you said, everything is kind of influenced by politics and vice versa, our laws, and it's important to talk about so people understand where these things come from, and the power that they hold over us as a society. And that kind of ties into my next topic that I'd like to talk about, which is influence. So in your experience, how do you think that Drew's teachings kind of shape the values and beliefs of like our people in our community? And what do you think is the most influential in that, the guidings?
Our teachings have especially our religious teachings, they have a major effect on us and who we are, right? And I would say the most important belief that we have is the idea of the oneness of God, absolute monotheism.
Mm,
There is one God without partner, and like all the other religions generally have the same belief as well. This is a shared belief, the monotheism, between Christianity and Islam, etc., the idea that you have one God who is governing the entire universe. We call our faith the Tawheed faith. The actual word is Tawheed. It's essentially the unifying nature of all things. It's not just the oneness of God. It's essentially like the entire universe is contained within God, and God is existence itself. So God
yes.
is the reality. God is the only thing that is real,
Mm,
right? I would say for the Druze, we have as well the concept of Sidq al-Lisan and Hafd al-Akhwan. These are two very important beliefs. You may have heard this before, but it's very common. This is something that the Druze emphasize a lot. Sidq al-lisan. It's not just truthfulness of the tongue. It's truthfulness of the mind, of the body, of the heart, of the soul. It's absolute veracity in everything you do. You live according to the truth. You live by the truth, and you act. Every single thing you do in your life, you're doing it according to the truth. And then we have Hubd al which is fellowship or cultivation amongst the brethren. So, being good to each other in every single way possible, not just financially, but morally, spiritually, physically, etc., etc., etc. I would say uh, these are the most important part of Druze identity, the oneness of God, veracity in speech, honesty, and being good to each other. Of course, there's a
absolutely.
whole lot more. It's a much larger scope, but I'm trying to simplify it.
No, of course. There's a lot to, we would be here all day talking if we needed to cover absolutely everything that, would influence our beliefs and the way we go about our days as, individuals that identify with our faith. And um it's a very, very broad scope of things that keep us morally and, in check and keep our beliefs and our values. It's very strong as a group, as a community. And I maybe just in general, I wanted to ask you about maybe some teachings or anything that you've seen, not necessarily teachings, but also traditions or any practices that we do that um, keep us in this faith in, like, have this influence on us. It could be donating, it could be because that's quite common in different religions in our faith. But what do you think we practice that keeps our faith so strong as a community?
The cohesion
Hmm,
that we have amongst the Druze, I would say, the brotherhood, the
I see.
solidarity, especially when our community is in danger. And this is
Absolutely.
evidenced all throughout history. Whenever our community was under threat, we were very good at unifying and teamwork within the
Hmm,
community. I would say that that cohesion based on a shared religious identity was fundamental to our survival over the past 1,000 years.
I understand. I see. So it's the literal bond that we have within our faith that has not only kept us so strong, but is allowing us to further prosper and maintain the, the values that we have and not really, mitigate from that.
Yeah, and this goes back to Hafd al-Ikhwan. This is what it's based on. That fellowship amongst the brethren.
I see. So we've mentioned, the Tawheed, and we've mentioned how our community keeps us together. Um, is there anything else, maybe any family traditions or anything that you see that is also a big part of keeping our values and beliefs and also shaping us as Druze individuals?
I'm not sure what to answer because you may have to reword the question. I'm not
That's
exactly
that's okay. Sorry. It's so basically, from your perspective, what sources are the most influential in shaping our values and beliefs? Other, than our holy book, of course. What do you think is a big part that influences us as a community?
the greatest influences on Druze, uh, the Druze as a people,
Yep.
as a community. I would
Yes.
say it goes, the greatest influences is going to be what God taught us, and that's through the holy book. So the Torah, Taurat, the Injil, the Quran, etc., etc. I'd say that's the greatest influence on Druze society, and of course, and how we, how we understand the Holy Scripture and how we interpret it via the wisdom traditions. I would say that's the most fundamental and the most important,
Okay.
source of belief that we have.
And what about when we're looking at, media and social networks?
What about it specifically about the media and social networks?
So do you think how do you think that they impact our values and beliefs as Druze people in our society? How are we, maybe different from other religions, other faiths? How is that shown through our media and social networking, as in how do we keep ourselves so together?
So in terms of the media itself, I assume you mean the mainstream media, right?
Yes,
The general
absolutely.
mainstream media here in the West. I would say the mainstream media has had an incredibly vicious and negative and devastating effect, not just on the Druze. Look, we're in the same boat. So the Druze are in the same boat as followers of any other faith when it comes to the influence of the media. The media has had a devastating influence, especially on uh, religious groups, right? Because the
Mm.
media is oriented one way. They have a specific agenda, which I would consider an anti-God agenda. So that means the followers and practices of our traditional faith traditions, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's going to have a negative influence because, as I said, they're pushing anti-God ideologies while, the rest of us who are trying to stay pro-God,
Yeah.
right? So the media's had a negative effect on the Druze people, unfortunately, by social networks. Are you referring to, I assume, like social network is a big word. You have social media, then you have the other social networks, the community organizations, the social groups that we all happen to be a part of. I assume you mean the entire thing.
Yeah, I mean, it, it's all a form of influence, in my opinion, where especially social media, let's say, that is something that we see on a day-to-day basis for most of us. And,
That's a good
that,
point.
yeah, and so, you see the
I believe people
I
are addicted to social media, and that's very dangerous. You look today at the modern generation, whether it's Druze or whether it's anyone else. Like you look at TikTok, people are now addicted to watching, 2 second, 3 second, 10 second videos and funny reels and whatever. And sure, like some of the stuff that you have, it is funny, but a lot of it is extremely repetitive. Um, a lot of it is a waste of time. But like anything, it can be good or it can be bad. It depends what you do with it. You can take anything in this world and you can make something good out of it. So when I look at social media or television or whatever, or even Hollywood, I mean, Hollywood has become outright disgusting these days, right? But there is
Absolutely.
still a lot of, you can still find a lot of, good movies and good things that you can pick from and you can apply in your everyday life. Just like social media, you can use it for good, you can use it for bad. The good part of social media is the networking, getting
Yeah,
to know people, meeting people, and finding that a lot of people think like you from all over the world. In the past, it used to be you'd be in a village, somewhere in the Middle East or Africa or Europe or wherever. You'd be in a small village, and all you have are the local villagers to interact with. Not many people to pick from that might share the same thoughts, same ideas as you. But now we're on a global scale. So you go
absolutely.
onto social media, and if you have something good and positive and valuable to contribute, you can find thousands and millions of people all over the world. They don't have to be beside you, but they're talking to you as if they're beside you. I mean, you and I are in different parts of the world. We're talking over video. If this was 1,000 years ago, you and me would have never met. It would have been absolutely impossible, right? So technology in itself, social media is a form of modern technology, is can be good or it can be bad. We need to stay away from the bad. We need to stay away from, this satisfaction with, watching, getting, all excited and sitting there all day on a phone and going through reels and videos. We're wasting our time. And I often say, in the past, people today ask me, how do I memorize so much?
Mm,
So like they ask me, how do you memorize all that? How do you keep that in your memory? I'm like, I don't know. It's just I read a lot. It's how I am. But it got me thinking, people today don't remember. They don't memorize anything. They don't know anything from scripture, any scripture. They don't memorize passages from books. But if you look at people from 100 years ago, they had better literacy. Or 200 years ago, they were way better. People could memorize books and poems and essays and large pieces of writing. It's different than you have today. Today, you have people that are entertained by movies, and they actually can memorize movies fairly well, right? That they're just that visual media, that interaction has got them, right? I think
absolutely.
you, yeah, I think you should be able to take the good out of all things. Like I can sit there in front of a movie, and or a movie series that I love. For example, like you're in Australia, right? So Hugh Jackman is one of my favorite actors, and I'm a big fan of the X-Men movies. I know them inside and out, right? But then again, I
Absolutely.
also know the relevant parts of my history as a Druze inside and out. I know you know the political world inside and out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I believe the majority of human beings today, and especially the younger generation, is at the edge of a cliff and they're about to fall off and they need to change course before it's too late. And it's also shown, psychologically speaking, social media can have a very devastating effect in other ways, especially amongst young women. They've done studies amongst young women, and this idea that these young girls are either they're being harmed psychologically for that attention, that you put one picture up, then you put another picture up, and you put a third picture up, and you're just there for the likes, you're there for the attention, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you got to take the good and you got to do away with the bad.
Yeah, 1000%. Because especially since social media is so overflowing with information and different ideologies, and
It's here to stay, right? It's here to stay.
it's here
It's
to
not going
stay.
anywhere. So we can't
It's
avoid it. We have to know how to manage it.
absolutely. And I don't think our brains are even programmed, excuse me, to take all of this information and to be able to comprehend it well and to even realize if its effect is not the best intentions, with the best intentions or not. It's a very confusing and still pretty new concept. Um, and so I feel like, especially, myself included, as young people, we are the main audience
But
of.
for you in grade 12, it's basically all you've known because Facebook launched in 2005, right? I was past my teenage years when social media became a thing. But for your generation, it's a little bit different. My generation, we grew up in the 80s and in the 90s. There was no influence of social media. The internet was starting to become a thing, but we were outside, we were playing with our friends, we had that human to human interaction. But the difficulty, especially now with your generation, essentially you can say 2005, it's been 19 years. Your entire generation has been in the social media generation, so it's going to be even more difficult for your generation to break away from that, right? I'm not saying, reject all social media. I'm saying you got to know how to manage it. Take the good out of it, just like you take the good out of a movie or a play or whatever, and you keep away what's not good.
Absolutely. And, stemming from that, you know, of course, social networks and social media aren't the only influences that are present. I was also wondering if you think that on top of those influences, there are others that have made a divide between, the younger generation and the older generation of Druze individuals. So my question really is that do you notice any differences, notable differences between, how the younger and older generations are, how they perceive
Fundamental,
them? Yeah,
fundamental
fundamental.
difference.
Yeah.
So I'm born and raised in the West, so I can address what I've seen here in the West amongst Druze society. So I'm a Lebanese Druze. So the majority of Lebanese Druze came from Lebanon to find a better life here. And from what I understand, the idea was everyone wanted to go back to Lebanon. They wanted to go back to their homeland, but they came here, they realized it was better and they stayed here, and their first generation, they brought about the next generation. So I'm second generation, right?
Right.
I believe there's a giant divide between the older generation and the younger generation. So the older generation is a generation I'm talking about, the ones that came here and set our roots here. Their goal was survival. They just wanted to survive. They largely moved for economic reasons, right? It was not for religious reasons. It was not for cultural reasons. It was for economic reasons. So groups of Druze came over. They migrated to the West. They found a better way of life. They realized it's gonna be better here, and then they started to create communities and organizations and associations. The modern day, especially amongst the Druze, we've had a challenge. So we have the same challenge that every other group has in terms of the negative influences of social media, the mainstream media, even the modern public school system, cultural influences, and whatever. We're facing that just like anybody else is, but also the lack of understanding our faith and understanding who we are as a Druze. We have that additional thing to deal with. I see that the previous generation or the older generation here, you know, they know who they are. They grew up in the Middle East. They grew up amongst their people, right? They're comfortable, right? They
Yeah.
don't understand the struggle that the second generation and the third generation has because we're born and raised in the West. We're not born and raised amongst exclusive Arab culture, whether it's in Lebanon or you're from Syria, whether it's in Syria or Palestine or Jordan or anywhere else you have Druze people. So for us, the experience is going to be different in that, even the Arabic language, the vast, a lot of people who are Arabs, whether they're Druze or otherwise, their Arabic is not as good as it would be in the Middle East. That's a big difference. The younger people also seem to, because we're set here, because we're established, economics is not as important as it was for the previous generation. Like, we're good here, our families are doing well. We all went to school, we got educated, and alhamdulillah, we have, at least from what I know, decent decent jobs. So economically, we're not as concerned as now because we're satisfied economically. Now we go on to other matters, and you'll find in human societies, when people are satisfied economically, then they're able to focus more on matters of faith and spirituality and religion, et cetera, et cetera. So our younger generation today is is struggling in this regard. Okay, now we want to know more about our faith. We
Mm.
want to know more about our history, our tradition, the Middle East, our culture, our language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Who's going to teach us? How are we going to learn? Who can we trust? And there's a divide between the older generation, the previous generation, and the younger modern generation. I feel there is a divide. The older generation, because they're, you can say, satisfied, they seem to be more secular, and you can see amongst the vast majority of the Druze organizations in the West, like all over the West, the Druze have tons of organizations everywhere. United States, Canada, Australia, we have organizations everywhere. But the vast majority of organizations are led by individuals with a secular mindset, non-religious mindset, non you know uh, it's mostly a secular leadership. And because it's
Yeah.
a secular leadership, they are not able to lead us the way we need to be led, which is we need a religious leadership, not like the Middle East. Much of the Druze leadership in the Middle East there is a lot of Druze religious leadership in the Middle East. It's very common. But here in the West, we don't have it. And this is what
That's
the
right.
younger generation is struggling for. This is what the younger generation wants. We want the right role models. We want the proper religious role models, the people that we can follow and look up to. I sense the secular leadership is not able to achieve what the young generation needs. My belief amongst the Druze is that we can no longer be led by secular minded individuals who put religion as priority number two. This is wrong. We need to be
Yeah,
led by individuals who are well versed, who have a great understanding of both our religion and politics, and the governing structures of societies and organizations and whatever, and public relations, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People who kind of like put religion first and the other matters, important, but they're secondary. The culture and everything else is secondary.
absolutely.
This is the fundamental shift that we need. So we need to change, and inshallah, the current generation and the future generation is going to create that change. So slowly, the Druze need to shift in the West from being under secular leadership to being under religious leadership.
I absolutely agree with you. And I
You
to
notice
my
that too, right?
understanding, 1000%.
And you're
I
in a
mean, if
different
anything,
country. You're
I
in
am
Australia. I'm in Canada, and you
abs-
notice it. Yeah, go ahead.
absolutely very much so. I noticed that. I mean, I think it goes without saying, and to my beliefs, I think that religion is the foundation. And then what is built upon the foundation is what these secular groups seem to be putting first, which I think needs to just be rewired into focusing on religion first. I mean, you mentioned yourself how we, are struggling a little bit in understanding our religious concepts, but we are just fine in the other concepts because those have been wildly distributed and they're everywhere. These are things that we can find and are accessible. But the religious concepts, it goes down to politics, like you said previously. Politics is influenced by religion and vice versa. So I think that if we can have
I'm gonna get you to pause on that point, and I'm gonna let you finish, because
no,
like what you're hitting on is something very important. And what I mentioned earlier is that all great societies, all great political systems have religion as their basis.
absolutely.
Look at the founding of the United States. I was thinking about this earlier today. The founding of the United States. What did they say in the Declaration of Independence? They got together, Thomas Jefferson and others, and they said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. All men are created equal. They're created." They put that word in there, created. That means there's a creator, right?
Absolutely.
And then he says that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights by their creator. So they're acknowledging God as the basis of American society. There is no such thing as a separation, a complete separation between church and state or mosque and state or temple and state. It doesn't exist, right? And then he says
Absolutely.
that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I love that statement. And again, it goes to show you that everything is rooted. They are the same thing. Politics and religion are essentially the same thing. You cannot separate them. Anyways, sorry, I'll let you finish your thought. I had to throw that in.
No stress at all. That just further reinforces what we're talking about. And the concepts both support each other, like religion and politics. And our societal structure is built on religion and vice versa. Our societal structure is reinforcing our religious beliefs, whatever religion or faith that may be. It is all intertwined, and it has to be for people to continue to follow these practices, but also the ways of life that we're living in on a day to day. So they are very much supportive of one another. They're structurally there because they are supporting one another. It can't be one or the other, as you've said. And yeah, I think that's very, very important to address, those interfaith connections as well, which is what I'd like to dive into, how these, have you seen, for example, Christianity, and how has that influenced the values and beliefs of, let's say, Druze individuals, if at all? Because along with the political and religious influences and interconnectedness, we also have religion to religion, which I'd like to touch on a little bit. Um, so with the Christian influence, what values and beliefs do you think influence Druze individuals, if at all? And can you give me some possible examples potentially?
Well, first I'll say that interfaith dialogue is extremely important. We live on this planet. It's a shared planet, and it states in the Quran that God, we created you male and female and split you into nations and tribes so that you may get to know each other. So we know religiously, men are supposed to get to know women, nations and tribes, or they get to know each other. Like, we're all different. There is a diversity. We're black, we're white, we're from here, we're from there. We are meant to get to know each other. And this applies, interfaith dialogue as well. So I would say, yes, it's important that there are healthy relations and positive relations. If you look across the entire spectrum and you take the major faith traditions, right? You take Christianity, Islam, you go to the East, you take Sikhism, Buddhism, Hinduism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a common set of shared values. All the major, faiths will tell you that there is a creator, there is a God,
Absolutely.
right? Some will say there's a plurality of gods, some will say there's one God, whatever. There is a creator, there is something holy, okay? And
Of
that's
power.
important. A higher power, right? Today they use the terminology higher power, although I prefer to say God.
Yeah.
Because some people like to say higher power, then I'm like, you mean God, right? They just don't want to say the word God. I notice today in modern society, it's like they shy
Mhm.
away. Like, if you say there's a
Yeah,
higher power, there's an intellectual design, there's intelligent design to the universe. It must have a creator. Well, that's the definition of God. Just say God, right? That's the definition
absolutely.
of it. Why do we have to go into all these different words and terminologies, right? They
Absolutely.
all teach you to be good to each other. They all teach you that, marriage is important. They all teach you that the nuclear family unit is important. You have mom, dad, you have children. They all teach you to honor thy mother and father. They all teach you not to lie. They all teach you not to steal. They all teach you not to hurt, etc., etc., etc. Like, there is so much that we hold in common. So it's so sad that we take what makes us different and we hurt each other over it. We fight
Yeah.
each other over it. We kill each other over it. This is the problem, right? And I say the differences that we have, keep it to the realm of the scholars. Keep
Mm.
it internal. Keep it to the theologians. Keep it to that intellectual group, that intellectual
Absolutely.
level. Okay?
Absolutely.
You have the right to believe what you want to believe. Absolutely. I believe every human being on this planet has a right to believe what they want to believe. There's 6 billion human beings. There's all these different religions and cultures and whatever. You have the right to believe what you want to believe, but you don't have the right to aggress on another individual. You don't have the right to force your belief, whether physically or psychologically, on another individual. You know,
That's
that's what we need to understand. We need to respect the boundaries. So if you're a Christian or you're a Muslim or you're a Hindu or you're, a member of any other group and you believe that your group is, the most correct and the most right, that's totally
superior. Yeah.
fine. You have the right to believe that, just as I have a right to believe that my group is mostly is the most correct group, right? But
Right.
we don't have a right to push ourselves on others, and let's focus on what we hold in common. So I consider interfaith dialogue as extremely important. Now, you specifically mentioned Christianity, and there is a harmony of belief. There are many similarities between Tawheed and Christianity, and there are also differences between the Druze and the Christians. Um, and it's beyond, to go through the entire thing, it's beyond the scope of what we're doing today, especially like there is a harmony in belief, especially when it comes to the idea of the logos itself, right? um but there are also, I wouldn't say there are Christian beliefs that affect the Druze, or Druze beliefs that affect the Christians, right? Because like the Druze are like us as Druze, like we believe in the Gospels. We accept the Gospels, right? It's a fundamental source of Scripture, just like a Torah, just like the Quran, right? But we developed historically 1,000 years ago, which is 1,000 years after Christianity, right?
Mm.
I would say there's a lot of respect. Like there's been turmoil in the past. Like I don't know if you know, like in the previous century, when you go to the 1800s, you had civil war between the Druze and the Christians, especially in Lebanon, approximately 1840s to the 1860s, right? But today there is more coexistence and harmony. The Druze, I can talk about me as a Druze. I can't talk about on behalf of Christians how they see us, but as a Druze, I can tell you there's a lot of respect, especially for pious Christian figures. The common example, especially in Lebanon, would be Charbel, Saint Charbel. I'm not sure if you've heard of that name, but he was a pious Maronite Christian saint who lived in the 19th century in
Mm.
Lebanon. And, the Druze have a lot of, respect for him. He was a pious individual, a holy man. And the Druze in Lebanon visit uh, his shrine, I guess, in Lebanon. I've been there like in 2009. So
Mm.
I would say that from the Druze side, we do have a lot of, respect for the spiritual figures of the other major faith groups, because
Yeah.
they're all good people. They're all directing you towards the one. They're all directing you towards God, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's what unifies all of our religions and faiths is just that the idea of the existence of a God, of a creator.
That's
Um,
the most fundamental thing.
that
We
the
can we can
most,
all agree on that, and we should keep it at that, and stop trying to focus on our differences.
I
This
agree.
is
I
a
think I
failure
think
of humanity. This is the human ego. This is
1000%.
our ego talking to us. What makes you different than me? We're always looking for the negative. We're always looking, for why, I'm better than you because of so and so, and it doesn't matter. You can be a member of the you can be a member of the same religion, and you can fight because you're from two different countries. You can be a member of the same, of the same village, and yet you're two competing families.
Absolutely. Yeah, 1000%. It's the the idea and the ability to have peace should not be affected if the foundational agreement that there is a creator is there. Of course, there's, little conflicts. We've got wars and things that happen for several other reasons, but regardless, the one thing that can at least allow us to be and exist, in my opinion, of course, is that the idea that we share our belief in the creator. And then that comes with, that branches out into every religion and faith's own, book of beliefs and how we use not use, but how we understand that there is one creator to go about our daily lives and live our daily lives. For us, we know that we believe that, God is always watching us, and that's shared in other religions and faiths as well. And so we want to do right by that, so we're morally educated within society, through society and through our faith to go about our lives and live in as much of a peaceful life as possible and to carry that belief of the creator throughout our life so that we can, whatever religions and faiths believe in the afterlife and whatever, we are doing right by us and by our creator. So I think that's a very important shared ideology that there is one creator and therefore we have to uphold ourselves and carry ourselves to the expectations that we've placed on that. And so, yeah, that's my view on, like the broader societal context and how these different faiths and different individuals within different religions are influencing uh, just the idea of peace. And I think that's very important. And you as someone that's knowledgeable in quite a few, religions and faiths, it might not be, of course, like you said, you can't speak entirely on one religion or anything like that that you don't identify with. Um, but you see what's going on in the world. And I think that's very important to note. And I think that I'd just like to ask how your understanding of these religions and faiths almost has almost like enriched your teachings, I guess, and your practice of the Druze faith, how the understanding of the world, different religions, different faiths, how that's influenced your own practices, if at all.
So I view the world's different major faith traditions as different parts of the same thing.
Yes.
Some people fall into the trap of, okay, Judaism, that's one thing, Christianity, Islam, and then, the Vedic faiths and everything, they view them as all completely separate. You cannot.
Mm.
You cannot view them separate from each other. There's a shared element amongst all of them. Even if you go, as far as India and delve into the Bhagavad Gita and read some of the deeper teachings in there, then you go back into the Middle East to the monotheistic faith traditions and you start to read and you really get into it, you're going to notice a lot of similarities.
Mm.
So I view the different religions in the world as different paths. Okay? They're all different paths. And we all see it a little bit differently. We're all trying to target the same thing, but we all see it differently. And there's something underlying in all of it. Of course, there is only one truth. Not everyone can be correct. Not everyone, if you have 6-7 billion people on this earth and every single person has a different idea or a different definition of God, not all 7 billion people are going to be correct. I mean, there can only be one correct, right? So I understand that. But I understand that when you delve into the deeper teachings of all the religions, you start to reach a common factor.
Mm.
And I believe one of those common factors that you reach is that God is real. And God is truth, and God is reality. God is, period. God is, period. He is the truth.
Yeah.
And when you start
Fantastic.
to see the world that way, it starts the way it's affected me. And the Druze perspective is that. The Druze perspective is that all, you know, what's the underlying factor? It's Tawheed. It's the oneness of God. Understanding that has allowed me as an individual to understand that we're in a spiritual war. We don't
Mm.
talk about that. People don't talk about that. They see everything in the physical realm. People are fighting over resources and land and whatever, but there's something else going on. I believe there is a spiritual war taking place on the physical plane, in the physical realm. This is where it's manifesting
Mm.
in the physical realm between good and evil, between the forces of good and the forces of evil, between the children of light and the children of darkness. Right? And when I say children of light and children of darkness, I still hold to the idea that we're all children of God. It's just that some are on the correct path and some have deviated and they
Absolutely.
become,
Now more than ever.
yeah, and they become children of the ego,
Mm.
your negative tendencies. They're children of the ego. That's what I'm referring to when I say children of the devil or children of evil. And this is what you're seeing right now. Allowing that has allowed, or understanding that has allowed me to understand the world and to see the world. I like to understand other people. When I know who other people are, I meet people and I know, okay, this person belongs to this religion. He's from this country. I have an idea already of their background and their culture, and that helps me to connect with them.
Mm.
We should not be afraid to know other people. We're sometimes afraid of the other. You
Yeah.
know, we're worried about the other. We live in fear of the other, and we should not. We should get to know each other. We should understand the other so we can arrive, at a set of shared values. So that's where it's gotten me to see the world from this perspective, that there is this war taking place, and if we allow, hopefully, I believe that the forces of good will overtake the forces of evil. We cannot allow it the other way around, because you need to have order in society. You cannot live society under chaos.
Absolutely. And so you believe that, amongst all that we've talked about, communication would actually be one of the most significant challenges in understanding other religions and our faith as well. Like, if others were to ask us about our faith, do you think that there is a slight bit of reluctance or maybe intimidation? I'm not quite sure. But you
Well,
think
human
that
beings are naturally, they're naturally, like I'm telling you, like most human beings succumb to the ego.
Mm.
There's always that fear there. There is poor communication amongst human societies, whether it's between different groups or whether it's in within the same group.
Mm.
There are
I
there are all
see.
these there are all these divisions. So communication is something we need to focus on. Communication is good, but it's got to be done with good intention.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There are those who reach out to engage in communication, whether it's political or religious matters. But you have some people, the people who succumb to the ego, when they're in communication with you, their goal is to overthrow you. Their goal is to
Yeah.
manipulate you. Their goal is to psychologically destroy you. But they're gonna come in like they're gonna come in and they're actually a sheep, and they're actually a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's the thing. Yeah.
They may look innocent, but they're wolves in sheep's clothing, right? And then there are those who actually have pure intentions.
Mm.
It's
And this
absolutely out of curiosity. They want to get to know each other. They want to negotiate. They want to come to a common ground, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and that's, I guess, the vice versa of that is what is causing that divide, as we've mentioned before and that we've talked about, is the divide comes from this ego, this lack of this poor communication, this communication with bad intent to throw people down. And I think that's a big part of the difficulty in sometimes unifying all of us and just getting along, just going about our lives without feeling pressured or fearful almost sometimes and of anything that of any expectations or any fear that will be put down, that it is cruel. It is cruel. And I'm not sure exactly, where it's stemming from other than ego, other than wanting to be right and prove that your belief is the only correct belief. And that's putting down all of us as society.
But understand that this is a natural state of human affairs today.
Mm.
And I would suggest we each focus on ourselves. I should
Mm.
focus on myself, you focus on yourself. Each person should focus on their own selves, on becoming better people. Moving towards that status that would make you as part of the children of light. You're moving away, from, being a child of the ego. That means acquiring the positive natures or the positive qualities, we can say of the intellect, as opposed to the negative natures of the ego,
Mm. Yep.
right?
That
Like, be
yeah.
humble, have humility. A humble person, or someone who has humility, in opposition to someone who's arrogant. Those are two opposing factors. Knowledge, you know, and then versus lack of knowledge, which is ignorance.
Mm.
Divine light versus the lack of the divine light. We all need to, work and focus on ourselves and gravitate towards those positive natures and overcome
Absolutely.
the ego. So
Absolutely.
the ego exists in every human being. There's very few people that have successfully um, overcome, and restrained their ego. So we need better role models. We need better teachers. We need better examples being set all throughout society to benefit everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And that actually beautifully tied into my next question, which you've basically answered, which was just if you had any advice to not only Druze individuals, but anyone who's having difficulty navigating their faith and is getting a bit lost because of the rapidly changing social and cultural landscape that we live in. We are changing all the time and things around us are changing all the time, sorry. So it does confuse us. And so my question was if you had any advice for those who are trying to navigate that complexity.
Wow, there's a lot that I can say here to the younger generation. I guess this can apply to the Druze and anyone who's not Druze. Start thinking for yourself.
Mm.
You know, stop learning what to think. Just learn how to think in general. Learn how to analyze and how to understand society. Um, Focus on improving yourself, on becoming humble. Focus on knowledge, on learning, on being good to others, right?
I see. Yeah,
Stop living in fear of what other people think of you as a human being. You should only care about what God thinks of you. No one matters except God. I know, we're human beings, we have parents, we have children, we have friends. Of course, these things matter, but not as much as God.
absolutely. Yeah,
No matter how much you love your children, no matter how much you love your children, God loves you more. So the ultimate divine father is God. We want to return to God. We should know who we are. We should inquire as to the nature of our existence. Why do we exist? Why are we here? go to school, learn, be
Mm.
good to each other, develop new technologies, etc., etc. Like I mean, this can apply
Abs-
to everyone. Find good role models and gravitate towards them. Stop listening to what other people say about other people.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Don't let, if you don't know an individual, don't let your judgment be clouded by what, other people of questionable character say about that person.
absolutely.
Because as human beings, this is how we are. We a lot of us, like, we try to destroy out of jealousy or out of ignorance or out of arrogance. I see it out of arrogance and out of jealousy. We feel we're better than everyone else, and thus, our viewpoint is superior, and society should follow our way of thinking. Whatever. I would say God gave you two ears and one mouth. So listen twice as much as you speak. Listen, understand, even if you don't agree with other people. Don't be aggressive. Don't be forceful.
Absolutely.
Right? I
There's no
mean,
need.
there's so much, right? Now, if we get into the now we specifically focus on the Druze now for the young generation. I would say the greatest challenge that we have is learning more about, you know, who we are as a people, in our history and our culture and our faith and our traditions, and being around the right people to learn about all of that. Stop, I would say, get together more often as a people and start unifying in what we hold in common, which is our religion, which is our faith,
The foundation.
which is the foundation, which are our shared values. And focus on building a community in which religion is at the forefront, our faith is at the forefront, and everything else is secondary, right?
Mm. Absolutely. No, that pretty much covers it. I mean, that seems to be what everything stems back to, which is just that foundation. Within any religious group, any faith, they just have to come back to their roots, which is our shared common roots, which is just the belief in a higher power, in a God. And I think that's the most important thing, especially for us Jews young people to begin to have access to and learn, because like you said, we it's been difficult to access, to understand our religion more, understand our faith more, and be able to learn from our elders. We don't have, here my parents have moved here from overseas, and there's no more your neighbors telling you stories or the wisdom being shared in the neighborhood, and there's no
Yeah.
education for, people like me, and
But
it,
this
it
is
can be,
happening. This is happening all around, right? Like we're living in
yeah,
the West. We're living in the
absolutely,
West. Most of Western countries and were faith based. They
that's
were developed with the idea of, like, I just read to you from the Declaration of Independence, right? They refer to the Creator, and
yeah.
largely it was Christian. We're largely in a nominally Christian society here in the West, but in recent years, this has been happening for a long time, and it's being done on purpose. We're being pushed away from godly values. This
Mm,
is this is an engineered agenda, right? That is targeted all Western countries,
mm,
and to push us away from God, right? And we need to understand that. We need to understand that there is a reality, because if we don't understand that, that means we don't believe that. We believe,
mm,
like, this is not natural. What you're seeing happen in society is not natural. It's psychologically engineered. It's a type of cultural imperialism, you can say,
mm.
happening here in the West. And stop being people need to stop being so easily defeated. Like, especially, if we talk, the young Druze in our community. You know what I mean? Just because you don't get an answer, right away, doesn't mean you give up. You give up the
Absolutely.
search. You give up the search. That means you were never really interested in the first place. I'm born and raised here in the West. You know what I mean? I never gave up the search, right? The search for God is endless. The search for knowledge is endless. It doesn't end. There's no state you're going to reach where you're going to be like, "Well, I know everything and I have knowledge." No, that's the realm of God.
Of course.
You know, the beautiful thing about knowledge, the beautiful thing about it is that no matter how much you learn, there's always more to learn. You can never know everything, so you can only know more. You can only learn more. And there's a beauty to that.
There is. Yep. 1000%. That is the most important thing, other is just building your knowledge and, being able to embrace who you are and find your purpose. That's a big key factor is to also that helps you shape who you are as an individual. And I think that's very important and very wise that you've said that. Um, but yeah, that's all the questions that I had. And I thank you for your words and your wisdom. It was very insightful and, for sharing your own experiences and your perspective. It will, I think it's really opened my eyes on society and also how we live in it. And not only that, but just it's taught me to go and maybe read a bit more about my own faith and learn a couple of things that because I've learnt that I don't know everything and I don't think anyone on this earth does. So
But that's beautiful.
it
That's
is
beautiful to be in a
absolutely,
state of, hey, I don't know everything. I want to learn, right?
absolutely.
And what I would advise people is your group that's around you, your social group, whoever it is, make sure the people around you are people you can learn from, people
Yeah.
you can benefit from. So, for example, the five people who are closest to you, make sure they're close to your level or they're beyond your level so you can learn from them. You can learn from everyone, right? And you can
Absolutely.
have people that are, underneath your level, people that you guide, people that you help. Like this is how society works. Each one of us should be learning from those who know more than us, and we should be imparting that knowledge to those who know less than us. It's a
Yeah.
chain. This is how it works, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. You don't need to be in a position where, hey, you're the top of the ladder and you know everything. No, that's not the goal.
Not even possible.
And it's not even possible anyways, because no one human being is going to know everything that there is to know. We need to we need to work together. I'm glad you reached out to me, Sandra. It's wonderful uh to meet you. I mean, we were discussing, leading up to this point, but this is the first day in which we actually, interact like this. I believe we didn't even, we barely scratched the surface from what we
Yes.
talked about. I believe we barely scratched the surface, but this is just, more of we can say an introduction. Did you get to ask everything that you wanted to ask for now?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely all of my questions. It is again very general introductory. We would be here for, I think, not even days, but months and years on end if we were going to talk about the intricacies. But it
Yeah.
is a very nice reminder to some and informational to others, genuine new knowledge. And I think that's what it's all about, knowledge.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for being on. Stay with me. I'm gonna end the show, but stay with me on after. Okay.
No,
Thank you,
all good.
Sandra.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.